Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So my name's Amy Hubach. I am, first and foremost, child of God, wife and mother. My husband, Riley, is a teacher, and then I have 3 daughters, Marley, Ella, and Maya. I'm a director of Christian education. I've been a DCE for 21 years, and I took a call in 2020, like literally a week before the pandemic hit, to Concordia University in Nebraska as an assistant professor and internship placement coordinator of the DCE program. So I moved there in July of 2020. And I'm also a licensed clinical counselor. And my emphasis in counseling was trauma, grief, and crisis, and my research was on depression, anxiety, and burnout in church workers. I'm just going to be starting my doctorate this summer, which will tie everything together for me with DCE ministry as a clinical counselor with trauma, and I'm going to be looking at my dissertation as institutional trauma and how to lead through that to bring healing to the institution, specifically looking at the church. So I'm pretty excited to get started on that. I say kind of because that's going to be a long 7 years. It's a lot of reading, but it's going to be good. So I do want this to kind of be an open conversation as well. So if you have questions, ask questions, and I will ask you to talk to your neighbor a little bit too if you want. I'm not asking you to share deep details of your life if you have gone through some of this. That's not what I'm saying, but some nods, or is this what you're feeling? Is this what you're getting? Do you see this happening? If you're a lay person, is you see this happening to your pastor or to any of your church workers, or how do we combat this for our church workers? So how many of you in here are church workers? Okay, and how many of you then are the rest lay leaders? Okay, good. I think this is important to be talking about as we look at church workers. But this isn't just for church workers too. This is for everybody, really. And there was a study that was conducted by Duke University, and it said that I got to find my thing here. That it's not unusual for burnout and depression to occur in helping professionals, teachers, nurses, counselors, and clergies. Helping professionals are involved in people's lives, sometimes in very deep and meaningful ways. What Duke found, though, was that depression in clergy or in church workers was significantly higher than the national sample. Pastoral periodicals often speak about burnout, depression, anxiety, family struggles, and suicide. And the descriptions they use are depleted and at great risk, heal thyself, leads to suicide. And it always gives like this sense of urgency. There's a couple of chairs up here if you want. Okay. So it was found that church workers find themselves in a stressful occupation, which includes having to deal with role conflicts, frustration, loneliness, fear of failure, and perfectionism. So I'm just going to pull these things up. These are what church workers have said in different research that's been done that they deal with. So with burnout, there's the emotional exhaustion, and the mental exhaustion. I can attest to that for sure. Loneliness, compassion fatigue, the confidence in the calling, unrealistic expectations, shame, and feelings of inadequacy. There was a senior pastor that said, "It's not the external pressure which I feel, but internal, because of past situations where I could not be real, or where I was placed on a pedestal and didn't want to live up to unreal expectations." So to be called to a position and considered a man or a woman of God, and yet have a job description that maybe isn't very well defined places people on in a place where the expectations are unknown, not only to that person, but to the congregation as well. So that's the first thing. I just talk to your neighbor. If you are a church worker or if you are a layperson, talk about, do you know what your set expectations are? Does the congregation know what your expectations are? So just take a minute to talk about that. Nope.
It's pretty well defined. So, 22 years.
My roles are very well defined because I don't know what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
I'm more of just curiosity.
Very intense.
I care about
See the numbers who are
well, this is good. That's perfect. Well, I don't know if burnout either, so I appreciate it. Are they conferences?
All right, let's go ahead and pull it back together. I know we're with our people, so it's easy to continue talking. So, just wondering, how many of you can relate to at least one of these things? All right, so that's like almost every hand I saw up. I mean, I can too. Again, I've been serving. I served as a DCE for 20 years, and now I'm at Concordia. I really think, for me, I can find I could talk about every one of these things. Loneliness is one I struggle with. Everybody, when I was in a church, was my boss, right? So it's a hard thing. Not that I didn't have friendships, but I'm going to be honest, there's some guarded friendships as well. And so loneliness was a big thing for me. Loneliness is a big thing for me now. We moved in 2020 during a pandemic. We haven't met anybody, like hardly at all. Friends are hard to come by in your 40s. That's what I've decided too. So with guilt felt and added financial stress and doubt of the call, anxiety level of church workers oftentimes begins to rise. Shame is different from guilt. Shame is about how church workers see themselves, whereas guilt is more about what they are doing or not doing in their professional and personal lives. So one of the studies said people may be more likely to experience shame when they fail in a role or on a task that is personally relevant to them. So for church workers who are being tasked with spiritual well-being of a congregation, failure can be devastating. So Barna came out with a study called The State of the Pastor. It found that 50% faced depression. Church workers in circumstances can soon find themselves overwhelmed and rounding that corner to depression. Some pastors in decline, there was a pastors in decline report that said that their lives have become a checklist of things to do, completed out of a sense of duty and necessity. They feel empty and find little satisfaction in their work. Church workers who are clinically depressed can often barely function beyond meeting Sunday morning responsibilities. 1 in 3 were at risk for burnout. Clergy ranked the most challenging aspect of ministry, and the top 3 were juggling the demands of the job, competing for people's time, and apathetic Christians. One of the studies said the job of the ministering person is never finished. So this was a study on Catholic priests. The priest cannot always tell his work is having any results. The work of ministry is repetitive. The minister is constantly confronted with people's expectations about priests, and the priests and the ministering person must serve the same people year in and year out. Burnout is tied to depression and emotional exhaustion due to the fact that secular priests were serving in a congregational setting. So they were talking about like priests that were serving like in a monastery, and then serving in a church where the rest of the people came, and that's where depression and emotional exhaustion came from. 1 in 5 struggle with addiction, of which pornography is the highest rated. This is for clergy in general. Yep. From Barna. And then 1 in 4 significantly doubted their faith. So a pastor with mental health issues struggles to manage his work and personal habits and may neglect time in word, meditation, and prayer. In fact, I was just talking to someone today, and it was someone that I worked with, and we were talking about struggles in ministry. And for whatever reason, prayer and devotional time or Bible study always seem to be the first to go. I think that's intentional of Satan, to get our minds elsewhere, that we're not looking in the Word. But when we're not in the Word, then those doubts start to come in. So again, I'm going to ask you just to get with a neighbor. So of these things, I'll go through them one more time. You got 50% face depression, 1 in 3 where it was for burnout, 1 in 5 struggle with addiction, and 1 in 4 significantly doubted their faith. What you don't have to share about you personally, but how have you seen this happen? Maybe even in your districts or in your winkles or your clusters or whatever. What has the talk been like? Are you even talking about these things? So just for a minute, again, talk about this. Nobody talks about this. It's interesting. So it's like pornography and then alcohol, online social yeah. So it has to be seen when they're
Well, there is like these ones around there, especially but you have a system of individual just like the rest of us. And so to break that sort of crystal image and say, no, we have to say no, this guy. I think it's just really hard. And it may depend on personality.
can't. All right, let's pull it back together. All right, so question. Of those 4 statistics, which one surprised you the most? The addictions, I heard.
Doubted their faith.
Doubted their faith. So why does that surprise you? Okay, supposed to be closer to God than the rest of us. Okay. Yeah.
I think that one probably piggybacks off of being lonely. Like, I think it's actually a wonderful thing to doubt your faith, because I think it gives you a ground to ask questions and to grow deeper in your faith. And I think if you doubt your faith and you don't have a place to talk to anybody or to be vulnerable with people, then that becomes a dangerous doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these I feel like piggyback off of some of the other issues.
Off some of those things. Yeah, what lead to it. Okay. So there can be that tension in the doubting of the faith. But what happens is there can be definitely go to that negative side where they give up faith. Has anyone known a pastor or a church worker that has left the faith? Yeah, I do too. I have a good friend who was a DCE. We just lived like 20 miles apart, so we got together often. He is no longer a believer at all. His dad's a pastor, his brother's a pastor, and he's no longer a believer. And I just think, how did that happen? There's still time. Absolutely, there is. It's not over. It's true. But
Satan wants to use those people who've been active in their faith, whether they're lay people or church workers.
mm-hmm.
If he can drag them down, then all of their circle around them
Yeah.
becomes affected.
Because think about a pastor who loses faith and his circle of influence, right?
And all of the people that he was a shepherd to.
The shepherd too, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Is this just dealing with smaller churches where there's one pastor?
No.
I know we have 3 pastors in our church and other workers, so they can help each other out, so I'm just wondering if they're lonely.
So that's interesting. They can help each other out. They don't always help each other out. It can be incredibly lonely, even in a large staff. Yep. Yep. Because you don't want to be the weak link, right?
So maybe they're not asking for help either.
That is oftentimes what's happening. We don't ask for help, which is what we'll be getting to. Yep. So the pressure to succeed, this was part of all of the research studies that I went through. These were some of the things that really pulled church workers to that place of depression and burnout and anxiety and everything. So effort reward imbalance, the stressful occupation, the fear of failure, and then again, lack of a job description. Even for a pastor who may be a pastor at a single church, a single pastor at even at a smaller church, a lack of a job description will not be beneficial. Because I have heard people say, well, pastors only work on Sundays. Right? Anybody else heard those things? Yeah, you said it. So that's, if there's a lack of a job description, even for a pastor of a small church, people don't know what kind of stuff that he's working on throughout the entire week. The effort-reward imbalance, high effort paired with a very low reward, leads to emotional distress and poor health outcomes. That's what effort-reward imbalance is. And really, it can feel that way, that you are putting all of this effort. So think of confirmation as just one of those things. But 1, 2, 3 years, sometimes we have a confirmation program, put all of this effort into all of those students. Say there's 10 students that come to confirmation, and then they do the confirmation right, and then we see 1 or 2 back. That's that effort reward imbalance. And it's not just the pastor or the church worker's fault. There's a whole lot of things that go into it, but then there's that feeling of, did I really do enough? Did I really do enough? Any of these other things, when we talk about effort reward or the stressful occupation, fear of failure, or job description speaking to you, or you have any questions about them. I see Christina going like this. Anyone? No.
I would say job descriptions at least speaks out to me. Like, I know my job description, pastors know my job description, how I do see it. But, and I mentioned this in our one-on-one, but a lot of the times it's the congregation members.
Oh, yeah.
Who don't know the job description that are saying like, oh, you're here all week, you can do anything we ask you. So, I mean, that happens. And so, I guess I definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and I will say, so pastors, people have a little bit of a better idea of what a pastor does, but the majority of congregations don't know what a DCE or a deaconess does, or a DCO, or director of family life ministry, or any of the other auxiliary called positions, because we don't talk about them. Is that what you said? Yeah, 'cause we don't talk about them.
Well, in the job description that you get called for is not your job description 5 years later because you've added 12 ministries. And COVID happened.
Yeah. Yep. So boom, there's some burnout that can be happening. Yep. Yeah.
I think paired with the job description would also be an ambiguous description of what success is.
Okay. Talk more about that.
Like, if the church is struggling, is it because the pastor's not doing the job, or is it because of a million other factors in the lives of the people of the community where you are, and shifting demographics where you live, and like all these other factors? Well, but then when you look at what we said in the city, and the numbers are declining, and offerings are decreasing, and all these negative effects on the congregation. So, what is success?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like to be? And that's just undefined, so people just gravitate toward what we get.
Right.
Also, I don't get paid as the pastor's wife, but there are expectations there.
Absolutely, there are.
People have a description for me.
Yes.
I don't even know they have it. And for a while, I was like, that's perceived. They're not really thinking that. And then I found that they were.
Yes.
So, not everybody. But.
So my second call, the pastor's wife said, so part of my job description is weeding all of the flower beds at church. And I went, you have a job description? And she's like, well, no, that's just what I've been told. That's what the pastor's wife does.
Yeah, I could go down a whiny trail here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happens.
So we're going to be talking about families and relationships next. Anyone else? Yeah.
Just a comment. I live near Pearl Harbor, and we deal with a lot of military, high-ranking people in our church occasionally. Been an admiral. We went to the change of command for the admiral, and the outgoing admiral his wife was all over the place. She had a job description of her own, and she did all this help and charity work all over the islands and then in Philippines, and she's done all this great stuff. The incoming admiral's wife is not that person, and she made it very clear, that is not me, that is not my job description. I do not help my husband with his job. And I appreciated that. Because
Yeah.
here's the admiral's wife. She's been through all this military life with him, and I was like, Bonnie, I want to bow at your feet. Because it was such
Probably wrong, I should.
yeah, it was hard for her.
Yeah.
She got criticized.
Oh, yeah, because
A lot.
the admiral's wives or the colonel's wives
Yeah.
don't say those things.
And that's how it was.
Yeah.
I don't know, I admire her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just make a comment.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to comment on what you said and about the measure of success. I think this whole thing that we're talking about, from the outside, you can still have all of these things, and it's really true in a congregation that looks like it has it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a huge staff, you have all the money you need, you're in a growing area, everything's great, you still have people on the inside who are working there who are feeling this stuff, and that's weird, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, why? You can't even, And the other person's like, we don't have any money, we don't have a building, it's all crappy, and of course I feel bad. But,
Right.
it works both ways, and it's hard to just define it sometimes.
Right.
Right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and so I know that this is a heavy topic. So, and I don't want to just be like Debbie Downer by any means. But this is happening in our churches, and we're not talking about it. Pastors get together at their winkles or whatever they call them. They're not talking about it. DCEs get together at their clusters, and they're not talking about it. So we have to remember that this is happening, but it's hidden oftentimes until it's too late or until some crisis happens. So that's why I'm bringing it up. We will get to some things of what can we do. So I want you to know that. But let's talk about families next. So clergy find themselves in the stressful occupation, which includes dealing with role conflicts, frustration, loneliness, fear of failure, and perfectionism, which is what I talked about a little bit earlier, which affects their families. And as much as we want to say we don't take it home, the reality is we take it home. We just do. How could we not take it home? One senior pastor stated, no, I already talked about that one. So anyway, so here's what's happening in families. Marriages, bonds with children are struggling. Whether it's their dad is a pastor or a DCE, whether the mom is a DCE or a deaconess, sometimes the marriage and the bonds with the children struggle as much as we don't want them to. They do. Because our husbands or our spouses and our children see some of the stuff we bring home, and then again, spiritual well-being and spiritual investment, and then there is a deep guilt because I can't be the mom I want to be to my kids, or I'm not the dad I want to be to my kids. My husband and our whole family was just over in Carroll, Iowa for a baptism. Our whole family was asked to be the baptismal sponsors, which was such a beautiful thing. The husband's a pastor. My cousin is his wife. So he's gone on Sunday morning. I was always gone on Sunday mornings. I was always at church on Sunday mornings. So my husband got all of our kids, our 3 girls, always ready for church on Sunday mornings. And I never did. So this last Sunday, Bree's getting the kids ready, and it's the Sunday morning meltdown. Does anybody know what I'm talking about, Sunday morning meltdown? And my husband says, oh, it's the Sunday morning meltdown. And I went, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you were always at church. This was every Sunday for me. And I went, oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't help you with that. Like, I feel a deep guilt by not being able to help you with that. So these are real things. I'm going to give you a quote. This is a book called Resilient Ministry. And here's what the pastor said. A few years ago, I asked my wife what it felt like to be married to me after 20 years of marriage and 18 years of ministry together. I was optimistic of her positive response. She said, I can't answer you right now. Give me some time to think about it. A few weeks later, I approached her again. Have you thought about what it feels like to be married to me? And she replied, yes. I know that I would never divorce you, and I certainly would never kill you. However, I can't help but think the boys and I would be better off if you were not alive. So at that time, he stopped. Like he said, he went to his elders and said, I got to take a break and focus on my family. Think about Christmas for pastors and for church workers. Christmas is this great, wonderful time, but maybe not so much for their kids who don't have them on Christmas Eve night and Christmas morning, and they have to wait till everyone else is taken care of. It affects the family. So we have to be thinking about, not only as church workers, how can I be there for my family better? What can I, but as a church body too, for our own church congregations, how can we support our church workers better? At one point, my first call when I decided to resign, I just had my third daughter, and I was told by someone, it goes church first, God second, family third. And I said, my husband said, you're going to resign. So there are the expectations sometimes, unwritten rules, that the church will come first. So if you're looking at your congregation and going, that might sound a little bit like my church, a culture needs to change. A culture needs to change. Questions or thoughts before? Well, let's talk about this first. The spouse and family stress. So there's that fishbowl experience. Everybody's watching you. Unwelcome surprises. Anybody ever had those? Yep, okay. It's funny? Is that what you said? Yeah. Perfectionism, this idea that our pastor or our church workers are perfect. They never sin. They never do anything wrong. The loss of identity. I'm the DCE. Not so much the child of God or the wife, or I'm not Amy. I'm the DCE just who serves this church. Family anger. You know, those PK kids. And then church over family. So, again, so 1977, there was a research article that came out from 1977 that said the proliferation, this is what the stressors that came, that spouses said came. Stressors in spouses of clergy. Proliferation of activities, perfectionism, role of conflicts, unwelcome surprises, goldfish bowl existence, no visible, tangible results of work, pathology of parishioners, and inferiority of feelings. So that was 1977. So nothing's really changed. So thoughts on this? Anybody want to, do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts on this? Do you want to talk together before you talk to me? What do you want to do? Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the comment that you made about what that person said to you. I think even in churches where that isn't said, and they do say, oh, God first, family second, church third, that isn't always what is truly carried out in the culture. Even if verbally we're saying the priorities are right, the sense is not always that.
Mm-hmm. So it's like the unwritten rule or unspoken rule. Okay. Yeah.
say I'm blessed to come from two different situations. My last congregation wound up being that very toxic place where my call document said I even had 2 days off per week, and I was questioned for taking those 2 days off. So I've seen that stress, and now I'm in a situation, thank the Lord, where that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And my observation, as a DCE, I'm incredibly thankful to have a pastor that supports that environment. So, but talking about that culture change, on one hand, people should be better, but it's how do you train your leadership, not just pastors or DCEs, but those in leadership positions in your church to combat that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's negative, you can almost touch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when things are good, then the expectation is it's never going to go south. Almost, we get used to it,
Yeah.
and it can be a slow burn.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to comment that for me there was definitely added stress, obviously because of the pandemic, but specifically because when no one was allowed in a room, it was our family that made church happen, and so and that was, and I was willing. It was almost beautiful and empowering. I can run Zoom, and the kids ran the sound and video, and we did it, but it quickly became too heavy, and it quickly became obvious that I was trying to be responsible and carry the weight of all of the emotions of all of our church family and be there for them and make it look as normal as possible and love my husband and support my kids, and it just turned into this resentment and anger and felt like my kids were getting taken advantage of when people were able to come back to the room and they didn't, and we never got paid, and there's this all this added, and suddenly it wasn't even him bringing stuff home, it was people just contacting me directly for needs, and I'm not on the staff, but because of a pandemic when only the family was allowed to be in the room,
Yeah.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a pandemic I shouldn't be angry, but I was angry, so now I'm acknowledging the anger, getting on with it.
Yeah.
So.
It's okay to be angry.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
I think sometimes the children of pastors suffer.
Mm-hmm.
As they get older, because they have to be these like perfect little beings, and eventually it does something to them.
Yeah.
So either strike out or do whatever. But they're supposed to be these perfect little beings.
Yeah. And they're not perfect. They're not.
I don't know about that.
No, but I'm saying, when they get to a certain age,
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I've had to check myself with is, speaking of pastors, because I have 4 kids, and, I think there's also the perceived expectations that come along with it. Like I have in my head, I have a 7-year-old boy who just is crazy, he just can't sit still, and he comes to church and he takes his socks and shoes off, and that's how he, just like, really. And in my head, I'm like, I don't want him to distract other people from, my husband's message, or I don't want him to be a distraction because I want people to commune with God. And that's my expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I think even just having the awareness of what's my expectation, is
Mm-hmm.
it realistic? Is it,
Mm-hmm.
is it okay if he takes his shoes off? Well, I've got to wrestle with that, but I think that's another part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, because because we live in a fishbowl, we have expectations on ourselves too. Yeah. I don't want anybody to think that my family is out of control sometimes,
Every parent loves his children.
children to act up.
I don't ever want my children to act up in public.
I realize as a pastor's wife,
Yeah.
I don't think it's only on her. I
No.
think every parent that comes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of our biggest, people say when they don't, I don't want my kid's just crazy and I'm not gonna come to church because we've all been, I respond, we've all been there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had to grab my kid by the ear and drag him out, sliding on the ground, acting up, but, it's
Yeah.
something we all go through.
We all, yeah. And I think we forget that,
Right.
too,
We're all human.
that we're all human.
All imperfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say that sometimes I think we have to be more forthcoming with boundaries,
Mhm.
like with our life. Like I'm a teacher. One of my students emailed me from her mom, or texted from her mom's phone about an assignment that was due the next day. Well, I was out to dinner with my husband. I didn't answer it, but afterwards I read it and I'm like, those are outside of my boundaries. And I said that to her, like, I don't appreciate you letting your daughter have my cell number to text me about an assignment in the evening. So I think we get so trapped in this wanting to help people that we don't set firm boundaries.
Mhm.
And then we end up burning out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Who? She's writing now. Okay. Yes.
One of the things that I wrestle with a lot is trying to be vulnerable with congregation members about my life and say, my kids aren't perfect, and my marriage isn't perfect, and to share the things in my life that are hard, because I don't ever want anyone to think that because I'm a church worker, I've got it all together.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are people that say, oh, it's so great that you're vulnerable, but you went a little too far.
Mm.
Like, you can share this much about what's real, but don't share too much, because then they'll think you're not a leader. Then they'll think you can't advise them on anything because you and your husband went to marriage counseling? Yeah.
Yeah, that sets an example.
Exactly. I'm like, yeah, if you're sick, you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
But there's just, it's like a very fine line of, I want you to know that I'm real and I'll tell you just about anything.
Right.
But there are people that go, "Ooh,
That don't want that.
Back up, back up.
Yeah.
I don't want to know that. I don't want to see behind the curtain.
Yeah. Yeah. Who had a question? Did you have some? Okay. Yep.
I would say to add on to that vulnerability, trying to teach people what leadership looks like as opposed to what we actually perceive it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because acting like we have this suit of armor on the whole time and that nothing can touch us gives us, perpetuates, words are hard, perpetuates the idea that that nothing can touch us. Right. And to be tough is to not show emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced kind of what you said when I was dealing with some of the fallout of my last congregation. I wanted to go to our board and talk about it. That I need some help here. I'm seeing a counselor. This is what they suggested for me, and my head pastor said, "Yeah, we don't want you doing that." I said, well, I argued they should know what's going on. I need help, and then he said, "Well, but then we're going to have questions whether." As a DC, whether you can be taking our kids on trips, whether you can emotionally handle it. Like, I can handle it. My counselor said so. So it's like we need to have this conversation if we're going to improve it. And like I said, I'm not in that situation anymore. Praise be to God. But I think it's important to be vulnerable. But the first to be vulnerable, you take even more arrows.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Did you have something?
Well, I worked, I work in the church, I'm a treasurer, so I work in the county. And you think, oh, that's pretty black and white, straightforward. No, I'm like the no person.
Yeah.
Constantly the no person. And so that's very isolating and lonely.
Yeah.
And I'm made out to be the no.
Yeah.
So the president says, go and talk to the treasurer. That's his way of saying no, because he knows I'm gonna say no, and I get to say no, and he gets to.
So you can be bad cop. Yeah.
So, I have really focused on trying to communicate very clearly. So when the person comes in, I try to get them to do all the talking about the situation and the path that they've taken and who they've talked to, and then I say, and then how did this make you feel, or along those lines.
Sure.
And so that when I do finally deliver the no, I've heard everything, and then I can explain it from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be working better.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I hear, now that's accounting, okay, so that's more, I don't know, it just seems different from when you're trying to coach someone on a philosophical or a faith or whatever. It seems so loosey-goosey as a topic too, but maybe trying that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, trying to really hone in on very effective
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
I think what you've done is it sounds like you've struck the balance between speaking the truth and love, right? So, and I think we can err on either side. You know, we're scared to set boundaries and speak the truth that we need because we think it's loving. But then but we have to speak truth sometimes in your case.
Yeah.
But you do it in a loving way, you know. So, just
try to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I got the criticism, oh, you're too blunt. Well, how many different ways can you say no? Not ever. I mean, how many times can I say it?
So when you can say we don't talk about finances, everybody knows that reference. We don't talk about Burnout. Yes. Right? You just say it to them.
Yeah. Okay. So, what can we do? All right. So for our own health, the top three: increase social support, decrease social isolation, seek professional help. So first of all, it's okay to seek professional help, to see a counselor. There are so many people or so many pastors and church workers who don't think that should be an option. If we just trust God. Now, I am a person who trusts God. Don't get me wrong, but I also need someone I need to talk to. I need to work through some of my anger sometimes when I get hurt, through my hard feelings, some of that stuff. So it's okay to seek professional help. And find someone, and I encourage you when you are talking to other people about this, find someone that you connect with. Just because they have a Christian fish at the end of their name doesn't make them a good counselor. So find someone that you connect well with and who helps you to move from point A to point B. Counseling shouldn't be just a venting time. It should be a time of work. That can be exhausting sometimes, but if we can go from here to here and there's some healing that happens, that's what you want from a counselor. Decreasing social isolation. Find a group. Find people that you can hang out with. And they may be outside of the church. And that's okay. I moved to Seward in 2020. I am lonely because I just haven't found a group of people yet. I had a book club that I was a part of at my last call of women who were outside of my church. And they were just a totally different group of people, and nobody ever wanted to talk about church. If I got together with church people, they always wanted to just talk about church. And so it was just a different group of people. So find your group of people that you can do things with. My friend Jonathan, he has a biking group, cycling in Seattle that he meets with. And he's meeting with people who aren't Christian. And he is sharing the love of Jesus with all of these people in Seattle that he's part of this group with. So it might take some time to step out of that group, might take some courage to step out of your bubble, especially if you're an introvert. But what do you love to do? And find a group of people to do it with, if that's possible. And then also, Bob Fossum. Anybody know Bob Fossum? He is like greatest DCE ever, of all times. Awesome Bob Fossum. But he was our kind of our district DCE when I was in the Northwest District. And one of the best things he did for me was he talked about finding a support group within your church. So who are 4 people that you could surround yourself with who care more about you than about the ministry? Now, we should have those people. Our staff people should be the people who care more about the ministry and the purpose of our church than us, because we are all for that. We are all working toward that. And I'm not saying that you should ignore if the people you're working with are having some depression issues or you're seeing them struggling. And we need to ask. But have 4 people that care about you, that you can be real with, that you can be vulnerable with. So I had my group of 4 women, and once a quarter we went out to a winery, and I love wine, so that's first of all. That's why we went to wineries. We would drink wine and we would just talk, and they would say, "How are you really doing?" And sometimes it was great, and sometimes I would cry, and they would pray for me, and it would stay in that group. They were the women that I knew would be my support. And I loved them for it. They cared more about me than about what was happening at church, the ministry of the church. And that's what we need. And then for those who could possibly do a sabbatical, and do it. If you need a sabbatical, take a sabbatical. So usually churches will say like 7 years, about the 7-year mark, or maybe 10, if the pastor or the church worker needs a sabbatical, a time of rest. It can be usually about 3 months of time off from the church, but that you're doing something. It's not just the time to go and sit in front of the TV and watch Netflix all day long. That's not how we recoup, but it's something that we're doing on this time off that re-energizes us and focuses our ministry for the church. So if you, has anyone ever taken a sabbatical in here? Okay. Anybody feel like they've needs a sabbatical? So again, it's a time that you do focus. It's a time of it is to be a time of rest, but you focus on a time of growth as well for you and for the congregation. Now, when you work this out, I think it was the Southeast District. Let's see. I think it was the Southeastern District has a really good sabbatical policy that churches can use. As I was kind of pulling things together, I think it was Southeastern. I have it in my backpack, so we can pull it out after this. But it's a contract that you make with your board of elders or whoever's your governance or however your church works, and they can kind of bake it into the contract that you're going to take this 3-month sabbatical. You can't take a call then for maybe 6 months or whatever, although it's sometimes a call from God. That's kind of a hard one. What?
No calls from God.
No calls from God for 6 months. And some churches will struggle with this if you were to bring it up. So you have to, if you're going to bring this up with your whoever it's going to be, I'm just going to say board of elders, if you're going to bring it up, come prepared and ready to answer questions. So I asked for a 3-month sabbatical from my church when I was working through my master's. My goal all along had been, so I was getting my master's in clinical counseling. My goal had been I would continue as the DCE, and we would open up a counseling office within the church for the community as well. So when we had a vacancy, before the pastor had come, we had a vacancy, and in that 2-year vacancy, 6 women were going through divorces. And of the 6, 5 of them were coming out of domestic violence relationships. And I just didn't know how to be the best helper there could be. And so when Dana and I were talking about what should this look like, we knew we needed to have a place where people could come. This was stuff he wasn't prepared to deal with as a pastor either. And so could I be the best helper? And so the plan had been to open up a counseling office. So I went and I asked for a 3-month sabbatical because I was going into kind of the internship time, and it was crazy to work 40 hours, 50 hours a week, because we all know how church workers are, and then be going to school full time and doing counseling hours on top of that. And I even said I could, I won't take a call. We can put it in there to won't take a call for a year, all of that. The elders were just like, so we got to pay you for not working? And I'm like, well, it's not that I'm not working, but I'm preparing for what's going to be part of the next ministry of this church. And the elders denied it. They said no. So now, the elders, I got a call in that time to Concordia. And so one of the elders was like, man, if we had just given you that sabbatical. And I'm like, well, you didn't, though. No, that's not why I took the call. But it was the right call. God had his hand in it for sure. But come prepared and know you might get denied. So then you need to say, okay, what do we need to do, though? Because you're going to have to be vulnerable with whoever that group is and just say, here's what's going on in my life, if you haven't been doing that already. But a sabbatical can be a good, powerful time of re-energizing and refocusing ministry for the church.
I'm just curious, had the church ever granted a sabbatical?
Has what?
Had the church ever granted someone a sabbatical?
No. No.
If they had, that would have been very strange.
No, they had not. They had not. And they had long-term pastors there before. They'd never asked for it. So, no. So I wasn't like, no, you're the DCE, you're not getting one, but pastors can. No. Okay. Any questions about any of this? Yeah.
I just make a quick
Yeah.
for Concordia Health Plans. I don't know, most
Yep.
of us probably have that insurance. And we actually have 6 free visits. Oh.
Go for it. Talk about it.
I mentioned that we have 6 free visits to a counselor a year.
Yep.
And I did it for the first time last year, and it's super easy. Just get on the portal.
Yep.
It's actually under the Cigna Dental, but then there's a list of counselors. You choose them. I emailed, set up the appointment. We just Zoomed, and it was just easy that way. So I just stayed in my classroom after school, and so you get 6 for a year, and you get 100 points for vitality too.
If you're doing vitality, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so that's what I was gonna mention that. So thank you for doing that. So if you're on Concordia Health Plan, 6 free visits. Also, your district oftentimes has support for you, especially if there's something happening that's like big time, like crisis in the church. There's usually a counselor that they work with that they will offer to you for free as well. And then Grace Place and Shepherd's Canyon retreat. So Grace Place I think they might be here. Is Grace Place here? So that's a network where a small group, or you can have time with Daryl to be able to talk about ministry stuff. And Shepherd's Canyon is a week-long counseling retreat for men and women in ministry in the midst of various stages of burnout, stress, depression, and conflicts of all time. And I think husband and wife can come up together, I believe, for that. So that's something to be able to look into also if you are at that place, because sometimes we are at that place of crisis where it's time to really do something. So I highly suggest taking a look at these things, talking with your board of elders or whoever, board of education or whoever you work with, and getting the help that you need. And I have a DCE friend who works at Concordia, and she did counseling, and she still goes back for checkups, even though she might not feel like she needs it. She goes back for mental health checkups, and that's important to do. to just go in and just kind of speak your piece and be like, am I okay? Is there anything underlying kind of stuff that I'm not noticing that maybe someone from the outside might be able to notice? And so she just does those checkups for her own health. Any questions about this? Or any questions I can answer at all? Yes, back there.
Question, just a comment.
Yeah.
I do counseling like once a month.
Uh-huh.
Like, I had stuff way in the past, but I keep doing it once a month, and sometimes I'm talking and there's things that come up that I didn't even realize were an issue. So I think it's valuable for like anybody.
Right.
Maybe not once a month, but
right. Thank you for saying that. And we can't ignore the fact that we all have pasts. Sometimes how we grew up was hard. Maybe it wasn't, but there could be things in our past that also speak into what we're doing now. And they speak into our relationships. And so just to be able to even work through some of that is good. If you haven't read the book, How We Love, that's a great book for, we love our spouses or our significant others the way that we do because of how we were loved. And it really takes a deep look at, and it's Christian psychologist and his wife wrote it. So that's a really good one. And there's one other book, but yes.
With regards to depression,
yeah.
I don't know to what extent you've studied this or read anything. On the one hand, as I understand it, there can be a difference between clinical
yep.
depression.
Yeah, like major depressive, yeah.
And that may in fact be an imbalance of chemicals
mm-hmm.
and so forth, and
mm-hmm.
to what extent hereditary or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But this referenced, the stress and these types of things leading many people into depression. So is that the same, or how do you distinguish there, or not, as far as that goes?
Yeah, so there's a difference. So there is like someone might be predisposed, right, for depression and may have that in their life without anything triggering it, except getting older maybe. As we get older, it might come out more. And then there's the episodes, like I'm having the worst 5 years of ministry and it just doesn't seem to be ending, and it's making me go deeper and deeper and deeper, which can change our brain as well.
So somebody can develop clinical depression?
Yes. So
because of the environment, circumstances?
Yeah, because then when we're going through those circumstances, our brain chemicals continue to release. Or like if anybody's ever been been in a situation where, this maybe not has to do with the depression, but we're just going to go with this. But anybody been confronted at church and you start shaking, or it's that you start sweating, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So our bodies, our brains don't know that difference between a real fight and a perceived fight. And so it goes immediately into that, and it lets off all those chemicals. And in fact, the blood, I was talking about this with my students in DCE2 class the other day, because we're going through the book Crucial Conversations, which I highly suggest everybody read. But the blood goes from our brain into our core, which is why our fingertips will get cold, because it's getting ready for a fight. So when we're going through enough stress, and the brain is just letting off chemicals all the time because of all of these stressful situations, it changes us. So you might be able to come out of it and do a reset. You might need medicine.
And would that same thing apply to anxiety? Is that